Hello, my name's John D. Today marks the second annual International Banking on Values Day. To mark that, I'm here in Bristol, the European Green Capital, to speak to Peter Blom. Peter's the CEO of Triodos Bank and he's also the chair of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Over the next half hour, we're going to be discussing the issue of values-based banking. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, it's a growing movement of values-based and financially resilient banks that focus first on using money to benefit people and the environment. But first, a bit more about my guest. Peter Blom is known as a leading thinker and driver in the development of the values-based banking sector. Triodos Bank, which he heads up, is the only pan-European values-based bank. It only finances sustainable enterprise, including renewable energy businesses, social housing projects, and organic agriculture. It also publishes all of its loans so that its customers know exactly how their money is being used. Triodos Bank co-founded the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. It's an organisation that Peter Blom chairs, and it's now become a global network of 27 independent values-based banks. Its members include microfinance and SME banks that serve poorer communities in developing countries like Brak Bank in Bangladesh, as well as sustainable financial institutions in the north, such as Van City, Canada's largest community credit union. Peter, thanks for joining us. If I could start, for people who aren't familiar with Triodos Bank, you're not like other traditional banks. What makes you different?
Well, we came in this area because we wanted to serve sustainability. And maybe it comes down to the first question our loan officers ask a project: what are you contributing to sustainability? And then we see if we can make it bankable. And with that perspective, we have built the bank over the last 35 years.
Now, how did values-based banks, including Triodos, actually start? Were they initiated by governments, or was it more of a popular movement?
No, I think it was actually a combination of people who want to see a different kind of banking and entrepreneurs, people who took the initiative to start banks like this, including Triodos Bank, started like that. No governments were involved.
Now, as a bank, you talk up your values quite heavily. What is values-based banking and why does it matter?
I think value-based banking is taking serious the fact that banking is steering future developments, helping people actually to steer future developments. So it's very important to have values at the core of that. If you don't have values, you can finance everything. And what we finance in the end affects our quality of life and the sustainability in the future. So that's why value-based banking is so important.
Now, I'm interested to know how Triodos works in the real world, because in the first instance you're wanting to invest in projects that bring about positive social and environmental change, but like any other bank, you've got shareholders. How do you marry those two issues?
Actually, our shareholders are our biggest fans. The question they ask at our AGMs, the annual general meeting, is what have you done last year for sustainability? And yes, of course, it's our task to also produce a good return. But the core is in our banks, also for our shareholders, sustainability. And that's quite unique. We realize that we're very grateful that we have such shareholders.
Now, when it comes to investments, what projects bring in returns that satisfy shareholders but bring about real change on the ground? Can you give me maybe an example of that?
Well, for example, we have one project in Amsterdam where Triodos Bank was founded and where Triodos started its activities. It's a big inner city project where there was the trams in Amsterdam were doing their revision and things like that, and it was empty for almost 30 years. And together with the local authorities, with entrepreneurs, we really created a new hub in Amsterdam where people can meet, where social projects take place. That sort of projects we want to support, and they're quite good bankable. It's not a real issue there, you can do it, but it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort to see the value of those projects. And now everybody's proud of it.
And it's interesting here in Bristol, European Green Capital, there's River Cottage, which is nationally a very well-known institution, which of course Triodos has been funding, and that's bringing about some very, very significant change at that sustainability level with the general public. So as well as changing how people shop at supermarkets. Now, how do you expect the banking industry to develop in the future? You know, in your opinion, what does a better banking system actually look like?
I would say the crisis we had in 2008 was actually quite good. It was a wake-up call, and some people call it even a near-death experience. it was good that not only the banks realized they had to look differently and act differently, but also people in society realized these banks, it's us, we making possible what banks are doing, so let's change the banks. Now I have to be also very honest that some of it is changing and some of it is not. You can see a lot of banks going back to business as usual, what I think is not the right direction. But yes, there are also banks realizing that they have a different role to play in society, support a real economy. And for Triodos and the Global Alliance members particularly, I think we want to serve a real economy, what makes a change, what makes a positive change. So that's the role of banking in the future, and we should deal with that much more consciously.
Now, I want to get a European perspective on this. We're in the European Green Capital here in Bristol. You're a European bank, you're in a number of European cities. Now, how is sustainable finance being used in some of those European cities to affect real change?
Well, I think we just connect with what's happening in the cities today. In my country, the Netherlands, I think the real political heroes are not the people in the national government, but the mayors. The mayors have the space and the freedom to make a difference locally. And probably the future of a more sustainable world starts with the cities. And I think that connects very nicely with the position banks should have. I believe banks should become smaller, much more connected to cities, much more connected to certain sectors, and be closer to the real economy and not be these big organizations anymore. So that will change if the banks wanted to survive.
Now, you're the chair of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Who are the members of that organization and what are you hoping to achieve?
We started in 2009 with this Global Alliance just after the crisis, and what we hope to achieve that in each country of the world we have 1, 2 or 3 role models of banks who make it happen, who really realize this nice idea of a value-based banking on the ground in different ways. So we have a member in Mongolia who has a different approach. We have a member in Bangladesh who work for 7 million people there. So many people, bring them out of poverty. Local banks like Van City in Vancouver, the European banks in the UK, in France, in Germany, how they realize a resilient banking model, what really can help sustainability. So that's what we try to achieve. We exchange knowledge, we help new banks to come about. We have a program for young social bankers. What is very important, I think we need new generation with new bankers. I think that's what we try to achieve and give our contribution to the change in finance.
Now, given your global role in this space, what do you think are the qualities of a good values-based banker?
I think the qualities of a good value-based banker is that he or she, and I would say really also she, we should really become more feminine in banking, is that we are closer to the real economy, to our customers. And not just as a marketing phrase, but real sincere interest, what do our customers want? And also mirror our customers what the effect is of their actions on what they do and how we can help them to be even more sustainable or being even more successful. I think that is what is at the core of value-based banking, and then everything follows from there.
Now, values-based banks seem to be growing quite significantly. Do you foresee a time in the future where they may be as big as the major banks, or do you even want that?
I don't want them individually to be as big as the big banks are now. I think that we would come in the same problem with youths, some mammoths, and not really able to change anything anymore and to act in a quick way. But what I hope that there will be many banks who have a strong connection with each other. So if a big project is there, they can go together for it. And I think that allows for much more sustainability and value-based banking than having these big banks doing very small steps to become more sustainable.
Now, in your opinion, what new developments are taking place in the finance sector that will have like a positive impact on cities and the places where we live?
I think that banks start to realize, also mainstream banks, that cities have the capacity to organize change, where on a national government it's almost impossible with regulation, with all other priorities. But locally it's very quickly very clear what has to be done. And I think banks should be there because there's also business. It's not just about supporting what's happening, but there's also business to do. And I feel I think there is a role for banking much stronger. And probably they have to reorganize themselves, become smaller units, become more close to their customers locally, and then they can really play a significant role in the development of cities and greening the cities.
Do you think there would ever be a position where a mainstream bank, that's one of the the really big banks out there now, will maybe set up boutique, smaller banks that operate with a values-based system? Is that possible?
I think it's thinkable, but what we see in value-based banking, that it's not sort of a mission statement on the wall of the bank. It is something what has to live in people. So people coming to Triodos, they are convinced of a different sort of banking and who they want to support. Now, if that's possible in a big bank over a longer period, I don't know. I hope it would be, but I feel quite of the sort of movers and shakers in value-based banking see much more opportunities in smaller units, in sort of growing banks like Triodos Bank and others. And I think there the change will come more rapidly from. But I'm hopeful and that the big banks make smaller steps. But have a special boutique, but actually still in the framework of a bigger bank, I'm not sure if that will work. You need this social entrepreneurship in the bank.
You mentioned your employees there coming to work. What is special for them coming to work for a bank like Triodos? And in terms of staff engagement, keeping them there, do you find that you have better staff retention than normal banks?
Interesting enough, we don't call them employees, we call them co-workers. What is quite significant. And new people coming to Triodos say, I'm not an employee here, I'm a co-worker. What is the heart of the matter, I think. Yes, people come and go. Many people come to Triodos to work for a couple of years and then find other things to do, and we feel Triodos is not limited to Triodos Bank. Some of the Triodos spirit can go beyond that, and we are very happy if people take that route. We want not to be a sort of excluded group of people and stay there for all their life. So that interchange is quite important. But they're very motivated. They're very connected to the culture of the sort of banking we will, and that is something what is very important in banking. And I must say, many of my colleagues of the big banks are quite jealous of that culture we have. And I say, well, you can do it.
Now, just thinking in terms of you're being values based, therefore your employees must therefore share the values of the people you're investing in. Do you find that makes for stronger relationships between you as a bank and the person who you're lending money to?
Absolutely. Many of our entrepreneurs like not only to talk about their business plan, but what motivates them, what are the ideas behind it. And then they suddenly see this is a bank who's actually interested in their ideas and think with them along that line. So I feel that is a real advantage, and that's what we hear back from our customers. You guys actually are interested in what my deepest intentions are. Let's work together.
So given that, do you think that's the advantage that maybe you have as a bank? Because obviously you've got to return, you don't want to have any kind of failures. So having the shared values between you and the person you're lending to, the fact they feel that you're more interested, do you think that gives rise to a better relationship and a better outcome?
Yes, it does. I think potentially it does. It's not a given. You have to work for it. And of course our customers want good conditions too and want a proper bank who serves them. But to have this shared values is incredibly important and is really the energy what brings the whole movement much further.
Now I want to have a look again at the mainstream banking sector. Looking forward, could they do more to improve the sustainability of our cities and societies? Will they ever even do that, do you think?
I hope that they will move from beyond the marketing and the quotes they have on being close to this sort of things, really organize them in a way that they see the sort of banking they can do in cities is actually the banking of the future. What means that maybe you have to downscale a little bit the sizes of your loans. You have to maybe organize your whole local office in a different way. That's up for them, of course, to find out how to do that. But I do think that banks start to realize that things happening in cities who are not happening on a national, even international level, So I'm hopeful that that will change the whole banking. Will we have the banks as a sector of a size of today? I don't think so. Because what I also see coming, that the banks fulfill a certain need, but there will be other providers of finance, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, probably also pension funds coming into big infrastructure projects, what they already do. So there will be a much more diverse landscape in banking, and that's good because we're also a diverse society here in Europe. So that's why that would be a much better match than a few big banks and a very diverse economy and society.
So tell us about the average Triodos customer. Is there such a thing? And you've got what, 500,000 plus customers now. Did you ever think you would get that big?
No. When we started 35 years ago, when I was there, we started with 5 co-workers, small bank, no computers, everything manual. We had no idea how this could grow, and you see that the time has changed, culture has changed. We had crises, sustainability crisis. We are much more aware of what's happening in the world. And what is very important since the financial crisis, people are more aware of the function of money and the function of banking and how that really will affect a lot of the changes we want. So suddenly you see a real awakening in society for the finance question. For example, who is creating money, where it is created, who decides on that. I'm a banker as well. We always say you are all bankers now. All our 500,000 customers are bankers. Only we help you to make it done in a professional way. But you have a balance sheet yourself. Go for it, make it more qualitative. So I feel that move, that change in society is something where we are very happy with, and we can help that change to grow.
No, it's interesting. I've come from a background, in the 80s I worked in an environmental organisation, and the biggest problem was getting finance together to create real change. Yeah. You've now created a new model where you've got 500,000 people fully investing their money with the bank. How potent is that as a change agency?
I think it's very important because those people are also civilians. They vote in a different way for other political parties, I hope, for other topics. They are consumers, they consume other products. So it's a whole movement of more conscious consuming products, services, including banking services. So that is probably how change will work. That enough people do it that way and it becomes like a trend and a long-term trend, and other people will copy that, start to enjoy it, and so we will change. But that takes a long time, and a core group of people who really want to persist on that and like to have that role and be very open, include other people as well in that the development.
Now, for people who aren't familiar with Triodos Bank, how many billions of dollars do you now have under management, and what kind of growth have you been having?
Yeah, we have now about 12 billion euro under management, and it's growing by 10 to 20% annually. And even after the crisis was even more, but we are on a stable growth path of 10-20%. That's what we can handle, and therefore we cannot suddenly serve everything and everybody. That's why we are so keen on other banks taking a similar role and be our partners in helping sustainability to really become part of our economy. I think in the end it's about sustainability is not opposite economy, opposite business. It is the new paradigm in business. If you cannot bring sustainability as a paradigm in business, and finance is an important sort of element of that, assessing that, valuing that, then I think we will not have change. And people start to see that, that long term we need that.
Now, we hear a lot about failures in banking being a failure in culture. Now, how do you create the right culture within a bank?
I think the right culture is about realizing what your role is in society. I think for a long time, many banks thought they were sort of having a role for themselves, being an ordinary business, making as much money for their shareholders as they could. I don't believe that's a healthy role model. What you really have to realize that banks always serve the real economy. That's where the real value comes from. Yeah? And you have to help that, and if you in that mode, you understand that even from an economical point of view, not just from a social point of view, then you have the right attitude and you can change your culture, and you have the right culture for a bank.
Now, from a Triodos perspective, what would your challenge be to the mainstream banks in regard to their role in society?
I think the mainstream banks has a real question, does the model we have, for example, being listed on a stock exchange with anonymous shareholders far away behind screens saying, well, this is the performance you should have and otherwise we sell you. The big question for the big banks who are listed is that the model, is that governance model, legal model, okay for a bank who wants to have a societal role? And there is a real difference there they have to come to terms to. And I think that's their big challenge. And then I really sort of feel that it's something they have to solve and have to think about. More and more through regulation, banks are forced in that direction of being more in a social role. And shareholders have to sort of be taken into that as well. This is a different sort of business, an ordinary business. It's a very stable business with modest returns, but hopefully stable. And then you can be a shareholder of a bank. That whole transition has to take place in the coming year.
Now, my final question is, if there are individuals and businesses out there watching right now and they're not happy with the way, their bank currently operates, what are the alternatives for them?
Well, they can look at different alternatives. They can see go to our website and see, well, this is a bank what fits my values, and come and talk to us. They can go to our colleagues in other countries. They also can go to maybe local banks. In Germany you still have a lot of local banks you can go to. Maybe it's close enough to make them understand what they do, and really build the relation with their bank. Be open to your banker. Bankers are really interested in helping you. There are many bankers in mainstream banks also who want that. And really put the issue on the table, what you are passionate about, what do you want to change, and how do you want to do that in a professional way. Not become professional because you are professional, because that serves best also the interest of the sustainability movement, and that is the sort of customers we are looking for.
Peter, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, for further information and to join the global movement, visit gabv.org/banking on values. At that website, you can also pre-register for an open online course that's been co-developed by MIT USA and the GABV. That course will be launched in March 2016. In the meantime, you can also go onto social media to share what you think about the creation of a different kind of banking system. To join that conversation, just use the hashtag #BankingOnValues. I'm John D. Thanks for joining us on International Banking on Values Day.